Hi, everyone. Welcome to the MacIver Newsmakers podcast. I'm Bill Osmolsky, the content director for the MacIver Institute. I'm joined today by Senator Ron Johnson. Senator, thank you very much for being with us today.
Thanks for having me on, Bill.
So, you know, it's still July. Big, beautiful bill is still fresh. President signed it into law on July 4th. I'm, I'm sure a lot of people got confused with that because there was so much back and forth and reconciliation. So, big, beautiful bill is in effect. It is a big important. It's an important part to the president's policy agenda. But there's a lot of misgivings on this. A lot. I think it was looking at some of the opinion polls. I saw half of Americans are against it, so those are the Democrats. Half of the rest are for it, and the other half are unsure because they don't really understand, whether it's good or bad. I'd say I'm in the quarter that's unsure. So, um, but Senator, you were a key player in this debate, and could you just tell us real quick, what your position is on this? How did you go into this? What were your priorities going into this? And how did that shake out? And what were some of those dilemmas and compromises that you had to confront along the way?
Sure. Well, again, I hope I can clarify it for you and your audience and get you to support it. But probably the best way to explain it is give you a little bit of a timeline in terms of my involvement in it. And the timeline really starts with the article I wrote for the Wall Street Journal that they published on the 1st of January, where I laid out the concept of returning to a pre-pandemic level spending. And I laid out three options. I went back in time and I looked at Bill Clinton in 1998, where we actually had a surplus, Barack Obama in 2014, and then President Trump in 2019. And I left Social Security, Medicare, and interest alone. Spend what you need to spend based on 2025 levels, but all the other actual outlays for those 3 years, increase them by population growth and inflation. Okay, if you do that and you reassemble that budget, you would have a baseline budget somewhere between 5.5 and $6.5 trillion versus the over $7 trillion we're spending this year and about $7.3 trillion next year. So again, that's a pretty significant difference, right? We spent $4.4 trillion in 2019. This year we're spending $7 trillion, so it's a 58% increase. And I was saying, okay, the pandemic's over. Just like after World War II, we went back to pre-war levels of spending. We should do the same thing in terms of pandemic. So it all started there. I laid out that concept, and that's what I wanted to use the reconciliation process to do, to return us to a reasonable pre-pandemic level spending. Okay. Now, next part. There was a debate inside Washington. Do we want to do one big, beautiful bill, or do we want to break this up into the components? The Senate leadership wanted to do 2 steps. I personally wanted to do 3 steps. I wanted to provide the funding for the border and defense while we pay for that and recognize about $850 billion worth of savings. That would have been our first step. The second step would have been just simply extend current tax law. Take the automatic massive tax increase off the table, get those things done quickly. We could have had those things done by April, and then come back. And now let's start dealing with all the complexity, the controversy of, additional tax cuts, the SALT debate in terms of states with high income tax, and really the very difficult job of returning to a reasonable pre-pandemic level spending. Again, we would have already banked about $850 billion, which is more than half of what we actually achieved. But anyway, that would have been my approach.
Yeah.
President Trump, Speaker Johnson, they want to do one big, beautiful bill. Okay, so that we accept that reality. Now you start moving forward. The first thing I want you and your audience to understand, that the most important part of the one big, beautiful bill, if you really think about it, had broad bipartisan support. The Democrats won't admit this, but that's the preventing a massive automatic tax increase. When they were in the same position, President Biden, they had the House and the Senate, they could have repealed the Tax Cut and Jobs Act. They could have raised taxes on the wealthy. They didn't do that. Instead, what they decided to do is spend like a aircraft carrier full of drunken sailors and incurred on average $1.9 trillion worth of deficit. So again, Democrats didn't want to increase taxes, nor did we. And that is the biggest part of that score, about a $4 trillion score by not increasing taxes. We weren't cutting taxes in that. We were just not increasing them. Okay, so that was the main reason I supported the One Big Beautiful Bill, was that. And the border funding, defense. I mean, again, trying to clean up all the messes caused by 4 years of Biden and Democrat governance. Okay, so we did that. Now you start getting into, okay, what do we do in terms of reducing spending? A big part of that is what we were trying to do to fix the damage done by Obamacare's addition to Medicaid. That's how the left does. I mean, Obamacare was not popular, so they don't call it Obamacare anymore. Now they call it Medicaid expansion. And if I could just take a moment to describe, because I would say most members didn't realize this, and the public definitely didn't. So traditional Medicaid.
This is an important point. So I want to drill down a little bit on the state impact here in Wisconsin too. So you go ahead there, Seth.
And Wisconsin's an outlier here to a certain extent, because our legislature has been responsible. But anyway, so traditional Medicaid was set up as a cost-sharing program between the states and the federal government to take care of the vulnerable, disabled children, pregnant women, people, at the poverty line, or, around the poverty line, again, people that need health care that simply couldn't afford it. It was set up as a cost-sharing program. For every dollar the states put into it, the federal government kicks in on average about $1.33. Okay, so states can administer it, but they need a significant skin in the game so they control costs. They would watch for eligibility. Again, it was a cost sharing program. Obamacare was the Democrats' next step to a single payer system. So they wanted to incentivize more people accessing government run healthcare. And the way they incentivized it is through Obamacare's addition to Medicaid expansion for single, able-bodied, working age, childless adults. Okay, people in the best of cases would have a job and are getting their health care through their employer, like most Americans do. Okay, but the Democrats wanted to sign as many people up to a single-payer system, to government-run health care as possible. So to incentivize the states to expand Medicaid, which Wisconsin did not do, they offered for every dollar the states put into Medicaid expansion for a single able-bodied working age childless adult, the federal government kicks in $9. So for disabled child, the federal government puts in $1.33. For a work-capable adult, the federal government puts in $9 for every dollar. Okay, that has led to all kinds of distortions. I would call it legalized fraud. Things like you hear provider taxes, provider fees. That's not health care. Okay? The great line in the Wall Street Journal is, tell us one other time where businesses are lobbying Congress to prevent Congress from forcing states to lower their taxes. That's basically what you're trying to do. So, this is not health care. This is a scam. The other part of the scam are the directed fees. So during the Biden administration said Medicaid can charge commercial rates. So we are finding that Medicaid, for the same procedure as you'll find in Medicare, are paying 2 or 3 times the reimbursement for the same procedure as we pay for Medicare. So go figure. So again, this has led to all. So what Republicans are trying to do is we're trying to eliminate those scams, fix the damage done by Obamacare. And let me describe part of the damage. There's an excellent op-ed written by a father of a severely autistic 17-year-old child. And God bless this family, they're taking care of this child at home. But they were applying for home health care through Medicaid. They were put on a 10-year waiting list because the providers would much rather, because they get reimbursed higher, much rather provide for a single childless working age capable adult than they would for disabled child. So this severely autistic 17-year-old was on a 10-year waiting list to get home health care. So Obamacare's addition to Medicaid expansion, not only crowds out traditional Medicaid based on the dollars it's sucking down, the hundreds of billions of dollars, but also it's literally crowding out the services for the people, the truly vulnerable, because providers would rather get reimbursed higher for the Medicaid expansion population. So we were trying to fix that. To my great dismay, what we didn't do was Rick Scott's, what I considered a brilliant idea, is if states want to have single, childless, work-capable adults on Medicaid, fine, but they're going to get reimbursed at the same rate as a disabled child. And we wouldn't do it immediately. We'd give states enough time to plan for this. But someday in the future, we just said you can no longer sign up a working age capable adult under the 9-to-1 match. It's going to be under the traditional, they call it FMAP, but the traditional reimbursement rate. And we could not get that done. Even though a majority of senators in our conference wanted it, there were a few that didn't. And here's the nasty part. Because of this, states have laid out their budgets. Hospitals and providers have really structured their budgets around the scam. Sucking down these hundreds of billions of dollars that we can't afford. I mean, we're $37 trillion in debt. Our deficit's $2 trillion a year almost. We're projected now in the next 10 years, the new window. Current CBO projections is total deficits of $26.4 trillion. That's what we're talking about. Average deficit $2.6 trillion in the next 10 years. Now it'll ramp up. Clearly unsustainable. So again, my biggest, what I was trying to do is using whatever leverage I had, because I need my vote, to get as much of the damage done by Obamacare repaired and try and get as close as we could to a reasonable pre-pandemic level of spending within the other mandatory spending accounts. Not Social Security, not Medicare. Obviously, fix the damage done by Obamacare to Medicaid. But Bill, we spend $1 trillion in other mandatory spending. $1 trillion. Mm-hmm. Again, that should be discretionary spending, but the Uniparty has transferred that into other mandatory, so it's out of sight, out of mind. In 2019, we spent $642 billion in other mandatory. This year, we'll spend $1 trillion. And that's about $230 billion more than we spent in 2019, plus up for inflation and population. So again, and we never looked at it. We never looked at it. And that's why I was pushing back.
Yeah. So I want to talk real quick about Medicaid, because that became a kind of a point in the state budget on why they were trying to ram that through before the 4th of July holiday to try to get, to try to lock in the old deal before the big beautiful bill went into effect. So, you mentioned how, the state provides some of the reimbursement for Medicaid, and the federal government picks up, matches that. Well, what a lot of people don't realize is that state portion that they reimburse Medicaid from comes directly from health insurance. So they charge the hospitals, that they through the hospital assessment fee, they charge hospitals an assessment fee, and then they give that right back to the hospitals as the Medicaid reimbursement, drawing in those federal dollars. So what the state government did, what the legislature did here in Wisconsin, was they increased those fees by $3 billion over the next 2 years. So in order to increase the Medicaid reimbursement rate for the states, in order to lock in the current reimbursement rate, or the pre-Big Beautiful Bill reimbursement rate. Now, what I've been trying to point out to people is that money's coming from hospitals. Hospitals aren't eating that. That is increasing everybody else's healthcare costs. So we kind of got screwed, as they raced through it. So just tell me real quick, how would things have been different had the state budget not been passed before the Big Beautiful Bill? What was the deal that the state was scrambling to capture before the Big Beautiful Bill went into effect?
Well, again, Wisconsin's, I think, one of 10 states that didn't expand Medicaid. So they really weren't partaking in this $9 to $1 match scam.
Huh. So,
So
but that was still
all
their
these other
motivation
states are
for
getting.
pushing through the budget.
So you kind of, again, we were predicting this, by the way. If we didn't really fix this, the other states were going to offer Medicaid expansion. They're going to start increasing provider taxes. Now, it's one of the reforms we did do is we cap that and we'll start ramping down that 6% down to about 3.5%. So we're gonna limit the abuse, but we don't do away with it. That's just the nasty thing. Once the federal government starts spending money on something, whether we can afford it or not, it's almost impossible to ramp down, particularly when, again, what Wisconsin legislators just did is they structured our budget, a good part of our budget, around the Medicaid $9 to one scam, that match. Okay, that's
what they were going for, because even though we didn't go up to the full 133% of poverty, we still have a lot of single-bodied able adults that are on Medicaid in Wisconsin.
So we'll get a 9 to 1 match.
Yeah.
On what is not health care.
Yeah.
So instead, because we had a 1.8% match, so we were sort of dipping our toe in that scam. Now we're dipping our toe up to the max, 6%. It'll ramp down over time.
Okay.
So the legislature and the governor ought to be very careful about how we structure our budget, because that dollar amount will decline over time. And of course, that's part of the problem is you can't pull the rug out from under people. I mean, this was bad law passed by the Democrats, Obamacare, hyped up further made even worse by Biden administration. So again, people structure their budgets around that. So you give them an off ramp, but we just didn't do everything we should do. And again, I kept saying internally, whether we reduce the future growth, and that's all we're doing. We're not cutting Medicaid. We're reducing the future growth and spending Medicaid. If we do it by $10 to $10 trillion, Democrats are still going to be telling the same lie. Then we were trying to save Medicaid for the vulnerable, for the disabled children. It's at risk because of Obamacare's addition to it. We're trying to save. No disabled child is going to lose Medicaid. Now, an able-bodied adult might have to put in 20 hours of work a week to qualify. And by the way, work requirements is a wildly popular concept. It should be. If you can work, you should work.
Well, and that's one of the scams that the Democrats are trying to play with this, one of the narratives, because when they say 10 million people are going to lose their health insurance because of the big, beautiful bill, they're counting on every single able-bodied adult who's currently getting Medicaid to no longer be on Medicaid rather than try to get a part-time job. They're just writing all of those people off. So, I mean, it's a total, narrative that they're just trying to.
And those also are CBO estimates, unless, I'm sorry, CBO is populated with a bunch of leftists themselves. And of course, they're going to put out, I'm sure they've got some calculation, some justification for it. They're going to put out as scary figure as possible to, just reinforce the lies the Democrats are telling.
So,
and by the way, so if a single able-bodied adult loses Medicaid because they get a job, is that a good thing?
Yeah.
And if they lose Medicaid because they're not willing to even volunteer for 20 hours a week, I mean, really, you want to keep mortgaging your children's future, paying healthcare for somebody who's not even willing to? Again, these are single, able-bodied, working-age, childless adults we're talking about here. People who should be working because they're capable of working.
And Senator, it's not just the future. I mean, as I was mentioning with the hospital assessment fees, it's not just, this is going to cost us more in the future. It's costing us more right now. Health insurance is out of control. And it's out of control in part because the states, charge the hospitals more, who charge us more in order to support, subsidize this population that doesn't want to work.
Yeah, but I understand with this thing though, 9 to 1, the hospitals are in on the scam.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
They are getting they're getting reimbursed and then some.
Well, here in Wisconsin, they were lobbying for the higher assessment fees. So absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. So big, beautiful bills in effect. Deficit's still increasing. I mean, maybe not as much as before, but we didn't get down to that lower level. I mean, does this set us up for the next move? Because, slowing the damage, we're still taking damage.
Oh yeah, no, we're hemorrhaging.
Then
this is, again, we had a meeting in the White House Finance Committee with President Trump, when I finally got to say my piece, I showed him one of my charts. It's an ugly chart. It's showing the projected deficit, and he said, "Put that away. I saw you on Squawk Box yesterday, Ron. I've seen your last 10 appearances. You're too negative. You're too negative, Ron." I have been pretty negative, no doubt about it. Okay, and it was legitimate criticism. Okay, because as I said, there's no way I couldn't vote. There's no way I could vote against the one big beautiful bill because the primary component was making sure we didn't have a massive automatic tax increase. So again, I was just until the last moment, I was fighting as hard as I could possibly fight to getting as much spending reduction back to a reasonable pre-pandemic level of spending. Again, I just have to reinforce how eminently reasonable that is, but we're just seeing how almost impossible it is to accomplish.
So, in terms of those tax cuts, I've been around for a while, I've been doing this for a while. I know the games. So I go through the White House's press releases and it says, in my income bracket, I'm looking at $1,500 a year tax cut. My question is, am I going to actually see $1,500 a year in lower taxes next year? Or are they just counting that if this bill didn't pass, my taxes would have been $1,500 more than they will be?
Generally, yes. I mean, so we prevented a massive tax increase. Now, there are some tax cuts.
Yeah.
No tax on tips, which I was happy. No tax on cash tips. I didn't get an opportunity to modify that to not include credit card tips.
Mm-hmm.
No tax on some overtime.
Yeah.
No, and by the way, we can't touch Social Security. So the way they handled that promise, no tax on Social Security, is we just increase the standard deduction for seniors.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry. I don't like people paying taxes, but is that fair? Yeah. I mean, the young people who are working, and again, Social Security is a pay-as-you-go system. Okay, you're working, you're paying the system, you're paying the benefits for people who are retired right now. They have a lower standard deduction. They're going to be, again, if all you have for income is Social Security, you will not be paying tax on that. You're paying tax on additional income, just like every other American. So and unfortunately, we put in a bunch of other new tax breaks for people, which I was opposed to. I was just a lone voice in the wilderness. I don't think we should be decreasing taxes when we're $37 trillion in debt, running $2 trillion plus deficits.
Well, in the way that
I was outvoted because
and the way that this is
tax cuts are popular.
Yeah, and the way this is working with is you're picking winners and losers. Like, I mean, I get no tax on tips is popular, but why is this one type of worker? Why do they get a tax cut? Why don't I get the tax cut? Because I'm salaried and they're on tips. So I mean, it's just
so the reason I was so supportive of no tax on cash tips, you can't collect it anyways. So don't even try.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Plus, I will say, listen, I appreciate the fact that President Trump is focusing on the working men and women of this country. I mean, that's no tax on tips, or that's applied to working people. No tax on overtime. That's to working people. So I truly appreciate that. I support that. I just think the better approach would be how about simplify our tax code?
Ron, since we're running a little short on time, I just want to kind of wrap it up with, hey, the economy is tough right now. The labor market's tough right now. A lot of, change is always hard. It takes, you don't get the benefit right away, but, we've got, I understand, reducing the footprint of federal government, but short term, tens of thousands of people lost their jobs. We've got thousands of people losing their jobs all over the country, like Microsoft, who firing Americans and replacing them with H-1B visas. Cost of living is still astronomical. Everybody in Wisconsin, especially, we see our water bills go up every year. Our electric rates go up every year. Everything's always going up. What's the light at the end of the tunnel? When does the ship start turning around?
Well, first of all, one of the biggest problems the American economy has right now is we don't have enough workers. We don't. Okay. Yeah. There's always people being dislodged from one business or one industry or whatever. But in general, our biggest problem is we don't have enough workers. Okay. Now, you don't want a flood of illegal immigrants depressing wages, but, we probably need a functioning legal system tied to our economy, managed in a way it doesn't depress wages. We need to recognize that we need people to work. We need people to work in the trades. We need plumbers. We need electricians. We need them badly. And if you go into the trades, you're not going to incur 20, 30, 40, 50, $200,000 worth of debt and not even be able to afford a home. So again, we've done a huge disservice to our young people by saying, you got to get a 4-year degree. Well, depending on what the degree is, how valuable that's going to be. But, there are fabulous ways, fabulous careers that don't require a college education. And by the way, we need those kind of workers. Mm-hmm. So again, I reject the premise that, the economy's horrible job market. No, we have a robust job market, maybe not exactly in your industry or exactly in your place, but move around, you can move. Mm-hmm. You might have to move. But right now, businesses can't find enough workers. Our education system is failing us because they're training us for the wrong kinds of work. Okay, we're encouraging our kids, again, to get into that debt, that $1.7 trillion massive student loan debt load. Never should have happened. That's just driven up the cost of college. So again, we need to get our heads screwed on right, make sure that our kids understand all the opportunities in the job market, and then it's spending. That's why I keep saying it's the biggest problem we have in government is it's just too big. When government grows, our freedoms recede. In 1930, Bill, the federal government was 3.5% of our economy. Today it's approaching 24.
Yeah.
Think of that. Okay. And again, our founders knew that, government wasn't here to solve our problems. It's here to defend our freedom. You grow the government, you're taking away your freedom.
Well, yeah. But when it's not just government, it's 25%. I mean, when you look at all the industries that feed directly into government, I mean, you start figuring out that, calculating that probably 40 to 50% of our GDP is directly tied to government workers and government contracts. We're trying to dislodge that, obviously, but at what point do we start to see the benefit from that? Because there's going to be pain, and we're seeing the pain right now. So, how does this ship start turning around?
Well, you're asking me to be an optimist.
Yeah, I guess so. I'm trying to be an optimist.
I'll be honest with you, I'm not.
Yeah.
Again, I just went through 6 months doing everything I possibly could do to accomplish something that is just eminently reasonable and doable, return to just the highest level. I mean, pick the $6.5 trillion number. The 2019 expenditures plus up by population and inflation, just spent at that level. Didn't even come close to it. Didn't even come close. So no, I'm gonna fight the battle. I mean, one of the reasons I voted yes is so in the room, I'm at the table. I've been promised a budget review panel, line by line, program by program. An Oval Office event when President Trump lays out here's the game plan for. I mean, he's the one that said he wanted to balance the budget. I'm just laying out how at this point impossible that looks right now. Again, we're looking $26 trillion of accumulated deficit over the next 10 years. $26 trillion, and all we could do is cut about 1.5 trillion as we added quite a bit more spending and additional tax cuts too. So in total, the final bill that passed based on current policy, which assumed we weren't going to increase taxes, we saved about $366 billion. That's it. We increased spending 1 year from in the pandemic, 2.1 trillion, never looked back, up from 4.4 to 6.5, now up to 7. And we cut over 10 years a measly $366 billion. So yeah, I'm not happy about it. Okay, I'm not out there banging the drum. Again, I think it's great that we didn't increase people's taxes. That's going to have would have had real harm had we done that. Unfortunately, we had to spend money to clean up all the messes created by 4 years of Biden and Democrat governance. That's unfortunate, but it had to be done. Okay, so I mean, so yeah. But again, I would not have increased the deficit by additional tax cuts and that type of thing. As much as I'm sympathetic with focusing on the working men and women in this country, I'm focusing on them from the standpoint I don't want these massive deficits leading to another massive, 40-year high inflation, or again, just the devaluation of the dollar is profound. Going back to 1998, that dollar's worth 51 cents. Mm-hmm. A 2014 dollars worth 74 cents, and 2019 dollars worth 80 cents. That's why you can't afford things. We are devaluing our dollar through the silent tax of inflation.
So to leave this on, maybe not on a positive note, but a productive note, what is your next objective? Now the big beautiful bill is behind us.
Spending, spending, spending. A budget review panel. I keep laying things out. A lot of my colleagues do not like looking at my numbers, but I'm just going to relentlessly shove their nose in it. Guys, no, here's where we're at, guys. Here's where we're at. This is the mess that we did not clean up. Are we going to start again? I've got a great video on top of my X page. Starts with President Trump promising to balance the budget, and then for about a minute and a half, Republican leaders saying some version of, we don't have a revenue problem, we have a spending problem. Yeah. And the final question is, so are we willing to fix it? Well, we weren't in the one big beautiful bill. We maybe made a slight down payment on it. And again, if President Trump ever sees this interview, he's going to say, Ron, you're being too negative again. Okay. I'm sorry. I have to tell the truth. I've got to lay out what the reality is. We've got a long way to go.
Senator, thank you so much for doing that. I fully support what you're doing there because I'm doing the exact same thing in Wisconsin with the state budget. So I know how disheartening it can be and what a challenge it can be. But it's great that you're doing that. And thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me this morning on the MacIver Newsmakers podcast.
Thanks for having me on. Just don't show this to President Trump.
He'll never see it. All right, take care.
Take care.